You're driving down the street and you see in your rearview mirror that there is a police officer behind you.
No, because I
Dawn,
didn't
if you
put
could
your
please
glass
mute
in.
everyone.
No,
Thank you. So you're driving down the street. You see in your rearview mirror that there's a police officer, and you think to yourself, "Oh, what's the speed limit? What's the speed limit? I don't want to get pulled over. I don't want to get a ticket." And you get pulled over because you didn't figure out the speed limit, and you are on the side of the road, and the officer comes over to your car, and you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, a ticket." And then the officer comes and says to you, "Well, you know, you were driving this fast. It was this fast that you were supposed to be going." Says, "Here you go. Here's a warning. Try not to do it again." Has anybody had that experience? Okay. So one of the things that's becoming clear over these past few days is something that has been clear for years and years and years. And yet many of us who don't have this experience do not understand, which is that for many of our African American brothers and sisters, that experience, the moment you see the police officer behind you, is not an experience of, it's an experience of primal fear. And the question that faces us today is, how do we, in a world where we have such different experiences, such different expectations, come to be able to help and to be people who are allies and who fulfill the mission that our Torah sets out before us, which is that we must honor the responsibility to repair our broken world. And make no mistake, our world is fundamentally and profoundly broken. So I'm going to start with a clip that I sent out by email. We're going to view it together. And then I want to invite some comments, some thoughts, and some shared experiences, because many of us, although we ourselves may not have this experience, love people who have and who do. So Sean, if you'll play the Blackish clip first.
The lawyer speaking.
It's important in the midst of all the public vilifying of the police department, whose members acted completely within procedure, to remember Mr. McQuillan was no angel.
What?
What does that mean?
Why would they even say that? What does that even mean?
Talking about somebody's child. That could easily be one of these children here.
That could have been one of us.
No,
Yes.
sweetie, no. Because if you get stopped by the cops, you are going to do exactly what they say, okay?
She's right. Listen to me. If you have to talk to the cops, there's only 7 words you need to know. Yes, sir. No, sir. And thank you, sir.
Exactly. You make sure you live to fight your case in court. You hear me?
Oh, Mama! Enough! Wake up! Let's say they listen to the cops and get in the car. Look what happened to Freddie Gray.
Yeah, and what if they make it all the way to the station? You remember Sandra Bland?
And let's say they do make it to trial. You see where that gets us? Don't you get it, Bo? The system is rigged against us.
Maybe it is, Dre. But I don't want to feel like my kids are living in a world that is so flawed that they can't have any hope.
Oh, so you want to talk about hope, Bo? Obama ran on hope. Remember when he got elected? And we felt like maybe, just maybe, we got out of that bad place and made it to a good place. That the whole country was really ready to turn the corner. You remember that amazing feeling we had during the inauguration? I was sitting right next to you. And we were so proud. And we saw you get out of that limo and walk alongside of it and wave to that crowd. Tell me you weren't terrified when you saw that. Tell me you weren't worried that someone was going to snatch that hope away from you. That is the real world, though. And our children need to know that that's the world that they live in.
becoming violent.
Let's finish
We're
watching.
getting reports now that
Let's see what you're going to say next.
being pulled now at the scene.
So I brought this clip for us because not only does it speak to our time, but it gives us a really important question, which is how do we see in each other the pain, the deep pain that is in our disappointment with the way the world should be versus the way the world is. So I want to invite you to answer the question that Dre asks in the end, hope. Where's the place of hope in this time of pain? In this broken world where we cannot see each other for the fullness of who we are. And I want to look at that question through the lens of our Parsha this week. So this week, our Parsha speaks about the priestly blessing. And in the priestly blessing, it is for all of Israel, for the priests to bless us. And the very beginning, the very first piece of the priestly blessing has a really powerful statement that we as Jews need to be aware of as we think about this situation. Now, often we talk about the idea of privilege and that we walk around with privilege, each and every one of us who raised our hands, who said that we weren't afraid of anything other than perhaps getting a ticket when we're pulled over. We have privilege. And with that privilege, our Jewish tradition says comes a responsibility to see in the pain of others our own pain. So I want to look, Sean, if you could share the screen of the text of the priestly blessing, please. So I want to look briefly at the first piece of the priestly blessing and then invite your thoughts, your comments, your reactions.
Is this Michelle?
Yep, here we go. So the very first line here is to say that the priests are in a role where they need to bless someone else, not themselves, someone else. And what they need to bless are people who they see as their people. Notice it says Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. And they say, Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and watch over you. What is the very first blessing, the very first level of our blessing that we give, that our priests give, and then as we as parents give every Friday night? The first blessing that we have to have in order to walk in this world is the blessing of Vayishmerecha, that you may be safe. And Sean, if you'll share Maslow's hierarchy just as a reminder for everyone here, and then we'll come back a little bit later to Rabbi Sachs on this question of safety as our first blessing.
1 second. I have to stop and reshare. Just 1 second.
Okay. The tech doesn't work as flawlessly.
You would like it to, no.
Online as it does in person. So this will be, no worries. For those of you who are familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy, it shows the various needs that we need to be fulfilled in order to feel that we can be thriving as human beings. And just as in the priestly blessing, safety is right there as one of those foundational things. After you have food and a place to lay your head, you need safety as your fundamental basis of thriving. That's the beginning of our priestly blessing. That's the beginning of our psychological understanding. So, question for everyone here, if you'll take us back onto the main screen, Sean. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. How is it that we, if we are not African American ourselves, but we have people who we love, who we care about, neighbors, friends, relatives, maybe even just knowing that we are part of the same community, part of the same people. If coronavirus has showed us anything, it is that there is no distinction between us as human beings, right? Coronavirus has laid bare this idea that we are different as human beings. All of us are vulnerable to the same threats. But as my sister shared with me the other day, someone said to her that we're all in the same boat. And she said, no, we're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm. And some of us have different boats that we're navigating through that storm. So I want to ask you, our priestly blessing demands of us here that Vayishmerecha, the very first level of blessing that we can give to someone else, is Vayishmerecha. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings as you confront this moment on our role, on our place? Where can we hear these words of our ancient tradition, Vayishmerecha? Rabbi Van Langton, Sean. Van, can you unmute? Yeah.
I did, and Sean and I had a little tussle, but we did. We are part of a social compact. We learned this from Locke 200 years ago, and that compact is not being honored with respect to African American people. 400 years of racism, 1619 is the date we started abusing them as people, and we're expecting them to honor a social compact that we are not honoring. The way we will protect either the Yishmerecha, keeping safe, is through restoring that social compact. And to restore the social compact, we must, all of us, become politically active. On whatever side you're on, you need to join into the public process that is leading to a crescendo on November 3rd. And whatever side you take on that, be active, involve yourself with other people, and make sure that we work to have an election that reflects the wishes of the people, because that is the general way that we are protecting each other by taking part of it, and get people to vote, especially young people, because in the last election, the favorite candidate was I don't care. 100 million people who could have voted didn't. We have to stop that. If we can stop that and get people to vote, we are going to be going a long way to making a better society.
I love what you spoke about, the favorite candidate being I don't care, because one of the things that I picked up from the Blackish clip is how easy it is to lose hope at this time. It really is. When you see this injustice again and again and again and again, it's easy to believe that the world can never be repaired. And one of the greatest pieces of super powers that our Jewish tradition seeks to instill in us is Hatikva, is the idea that no matter how many times we are disappointed, no matter how many times we face injustice, that we believe in the possibility of a world that can be repaired. So Van, thank you for those words. Would anyone else like to reflect on that? Cindy.
So it's interesting because of late I've had some very long, drawn out, sometimes a little, I don't want to say contentious, but strong, emotional conversations with one of my very dear friends. And what he said to me was pretty much what Van said. And he said, I'll synopsize, this is going on an awful long time. And for white people, you think it's gotten better. And maybe in some ways it has. he said, but I think he's 55, he said, as a 55-year-old Black man, having grown up in Roxbury, having gone to Needham schools for Metco, having gone to Jewish overnight camp because my parents in the Pentecostal church said, that's how you'll grow up to be a good guy. We're going to get you out of Roxbury. Boston University undergrad, graduate, now a businessman and a father. He said, did you ever wonder? He said, because I did. Just because it goes away and you don't see it in your face as we did, let's say, a week ago. Did you ever wonder why I have to speak to my 9-year-old daughter this way? And so when I saw the second clip, I said, Garland, I hadn't realized you still have those kind of conversations. And he said, kind of sarcastically, my friend, I love you, but sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And this is the reality. And that's why he sends his daughter to one of the most elite private schools in Boston, because he said in the suburbs, she would just be another smart Black kid, whereas an elite private school and belonging to the Boston Youth Symphony Orchestra and all these other things that she does, she's not just, God willing, another Black kid. He's trying to stack the deck to make her an empowered, intelligent, articulate Black woman, and trying to even the playing field. And these were some very powerful and very emotional conversations with a man and his wife who I've been best friends with for 25 years and didn't hear this level, you'll see I'm upset, this level of pain and understanding.
Cindy, thank you so much. The first level is that we have to hear. We have to listen. We have to have those kinds of moments. And that was actually one of the pieces that was critical about that second clip. So I know many of you have seen it, but some of you who are joining the conversation now have not yet seen it. We're going to play the second clip and invite your very careful attention to what is going on here and what is trying to be shared.
We actually have a line that we do at our house. We practice this thing. What is it?
I'm Ariel Sky Williams. I'm 8 years old. I'm unarmed and I have nothing that will hurt you.
It's just kind of a thing we practice at our house. There are great police officers out there. There's also some police officers who are not so good.
And my fear is that you run across one of those bad ones.
For some reason, people of color have always been a target by the police.
Before they became a policeman, they were a person. And that person took all their ideas and all their thoughts and all their prejudice into their job.
Why would a police officer assume that you did something bad?
Maybe because of my skin color.
I remember being put in handcuffs for something that had nothing to do with me. I was literally walking in the mall. Cops slammed me on the ground, busted my lip, chipped my tooth. That actually made me really mad.
How about the time they pulled us over with me in the car and arrested me and left all of you guys sitting in the car and nobody knew how to drive on the side of the road because the bumper on the car was kind of hanging off?
No.
You know, we live in Puyallup. There's people that don't even have a bumper on their car.
My rear brake light wasn't working, and I got to my destination and they were working.
I was about your age. Actually, they grabbed me.
Why?
I didn't know at the time. They just grabbed me. They threw me onto the police car.
I got tased that time. That time they tased me because they said I wasn't complying.
Ariel, are you okay?
What's wrong, baby? I'm okay, I'm alive, all right? Every day I get to see you, I get to do this, right? All right, come on, let's calm down, let's finish this, all right? You good? Hey, you're making me cry. Come on.
You have to be careful when you're out there in this world because this world's not going to always be honest or fair to you. I know, Sean, You got a little bit lighter than the rest of them, so it's a possibility you won't get stopped.
Sound like you just pulled him over.
Okay. If you're driving, cop pulls you over.
Police gets out the car, comes to the window. What would you do?
License and registration, please, ma'am.
Why do you think I pulled you over?
I don't know. Tell me.
When a police officer says something to you, don't, you're black. You can't be looking at them saying, oh, I don't know, why don't you tell me?
Well,
that right there is giving them the license to pull you out of your car and physically harm you, because it will be done.
Don't get upset. Don't get sassy. Why did you pull me over? You don't have, I know how, just follow instructions and stay calm.
Okay. Do you think just being a police officer and pulling you over, regardless of if you feel you've done something or not, they should get your respect?
That's a tricky question.
The answer is yes.
Yes. If you got to go to your wallet to get your ID, say, can I go reach in my back pocket to get my ID out? You could do what I do, and I show them my hands. So when they're walking up, they see I don't have anything in my hands.
I'm Ariel Sky Williams, and I have nothing that will harm you or hurt you.
And what's the next place you put your hands when you're driving or on the steering wheel with your hands out?
If at all possible, turn your phone on.
And call someone and put it on speaker.
But whatever you're doing, I want you to say what you're doing before you do it.
You don't write any statements.
Well, you have to write a statement.
You don't have to write anything. You're a minor. I'm responsible for you. No one can tell you anything else.
If he tells you to be quiet, be quiet. Do everything that you can to get back to me. I see it weighing on you, and I don't want it to weigh on you.
I'm just worried about Donovan. I'm worried about him now.
Who are you guys talking about?
My nephew and her cousin.
I don't want him to be shot. I don't want him to go to jail.
You guys, if you could say anything to police, what would you say?
Learn about people, learn about their problems.
Take some diversity training. I mean, it should be like at this point, like a monthly requirement.
You know, there's really nothing at this point that they could do that would make me feel any safer with them without them just point blank clearing them all out and starting all over from scratch.
So don't always assume that all of them are bad.
But all you see on the news and in newspapers, and it keeps happening. It's just in a different way. It's like how people are like, you should forgive so-and-so, but they keep doing it to me. I forgave them, but they keep doing it to me. It gets harder and harder to forgive them.
Wow.
Thank you, Sean. It keeps happening. It keeps happening. Now, we are a people who knows from it keeps happening. And one of the questions before us is, how do we understand our Jewish tradition as shaping us, as molding us today to speak to an experience that is not ours? This is not our experience, and yet it calls upon us to respond. This has gone on again and again and again. And our nation is at a place of looking at it, of taking it out and saying, all right, what now? What now? So what now? For those of you, I want to ask, first of all, those of you who came here today, you came because you wanted to be part of this conversation. Where do you stand in this conversation? Does anybody want to speak about your space, your place in this conversation as a Jew, as a friend, as an ally, perhaps as a grandparent? Wendy.
So I just have a short comment because I can't watch that without crying every time. And the little girl who's 8 years old, I have 2 grandchildren who are 8 years old, 2 little girls. And I think a first step is, instead of saying, this is not my experience, I think as Jews, we have to say, this is my experience. I have an 8-year-old grandchild. She is the same as this other grandchild. And if I am not teaching her how to behave when the police stop her, then thank God I don't have to do that. But I have to experience that father's pain, that mother's pain, all that pain as my own, I think, until we can do something. I think we can't think of it as happening to someone else. It's happening to us.
You are giving voice to a core mitzvah of Pesach, which is to understand that things that are happening to anyone in this world are happening to us. We share, we can use our story to create a sense of empathy. Wendy, you have an 8-year-old grandchild, and therefore this is your story as well. Beautiful. Anyone else like to respond at this time? Debbie. From Norm and Debbie, Sean, if you'll unmute her.
Norm, unmuted. Oh, unmuted, okay.
You're okay, Debbie.
Thank you. I just want to say, when that awful murderer went into the Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, shouting out he wanted to kill Jews, to me, I mean, we experience anti-Semitism. My daughter was very upset with, he just wanted to kill Jews. That's similar to all the horrible racism against African Americans. We don't show our Judaism unless you have a kippah or, you know, you wear a Star of David. It's not like blacks who are very evidently African Americans. But we understand. You know, we know what that prejudice and fear is like. That's what I wanted to say.
So important. A core principle of our tradition is extrapolation, right? We understand what it is to feel other and to be threatened for that, even for our lives.
Yeah.
Ellen. Sean, Ellen Cass?
Yep.
There we go. Sorry. I think we understand what it is to be persecuted, to be treated because of who we are, but I don't think we understand the Black experience. I don't think, without going into personal relationships with people who have gone through this, who have suffered through this, this is 400 years. This isn't just the last few weeks. This is, I mean, we could go way back when this country was not ours. It belonged to the Native Americans who are now on reservations, not living in very good conditions. I think we have to be honest about our ownership in some of this. We're complicit if we don't fight against it. I think we've reached a point in our history where it's not, which is why we're all here, obviously, but where it's not enough to watch, it's not enough to listen. It's time to show our respect and our caring and our desire to see things change.
Thank you, Ellen. Time to pay heed. Anyone else like to comment now? I see Annette, and then I want to bring you into some text. Annette. Sean.
Yeah, we're on it. Sometimes when both people press unmute, it kind of throws it off. Okay, you're good at that.
As I said to those who heard earlier, this is not new in our family. We have 4 biracial grandchildren. This kind of conversation has gone on for a long time. But I want to share the first time I was exposed to this as a parent. Our son Matt was at Beaver Country Day School and commuting to school with a boy who came from a family of color, and his father ended up in the ICU at Mount Auburn Hospital, and the mother called me and asked me if I would be responsible for their transportation back and forth to school for the unforeseeable future. And I said, yes, except on one day, I can't personally do it, neither can Peter, so they can take the T. And she said, no, they cannot take the T. Our son is too good looking. He cannot ride the T, even with Matt, who is white. He will not be safe. That was the first time I was exposed to this kind of concern. So arrangements were made. You know, our ex-son-in-law has been picked up. We've had these conversations with the kids ongoingly. We have a about to be 3-year-old grandson who's his father, Matt, said, you know, we're gonna have these conversations. We had to. Last night I had the conversation with a very dear friend like Cindy, who, when he first told me about this, he is a physician, and he said, he started describing to us what it was like to take his son on Blue Hill Avenue, drive down Blue Hill Avenue, stop when they saw cops, talk about what you have to do, talk about the places and what it was like. So we think of it all the time, and Peter thinks of it all the time when each Friday he blesses the grandchildren. We've adapted the priestly benediction, but we start with protection. And one of the protections is offering a place where you can sit and safely talk about this and hear them. And, you know, hear the outrage. I mean, we have a granddaughter who's graduating Newton South. So you put all of the disappointments of a senior in high school on top of what's going on and what's been going on. And it's pretty tough in our family. So for us, it isn't out there, it's right here.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you very, very much. Dina.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Michelle, and all the clergy for having this, having these forums, because I really agree with what Wes said on Sunday in the Minion, that racism is a Jewish problem. And for most of my life, I think there hasn't really been much work done in the Jewish community around this. And I think that it's easy for us to say, there's anti-Semitism, we're facing persecution too. We have our own problems with, bigotry towards our community, but I think we can't kind of use that as a cop-out anymore. Because we had been persecuted in other lands and this lands, we have to look at this as our problem too. And as Jews, even amidst the anti-Semitism, I think we have to dig deep and think about the ways that we as Jews benefit from white privilege every day, which we do, and that we benefit from white supremacy every day and the systematic racism that's all around us. And, as Wes talked about on Sunday, when I see a police officer, I don't feel scared. I don't worry about my son growing up and being hurt by the police officer. But because of that, my kids are 6 and I am talking to them about George Floyd, and I have had difficult conversations with them in the last few days, telling them that, explaining what white privilege is. And I think as Jews have to do better. And I've even seen some people saying, as the Black Lives Matter movement supports BDS and has issues with Israel, we need to be wary. And I just think we can't let Israel be an excuse for not standing with the Black Lives movement. We have to see this as a Jewish problem.
Thank you, Dina. I want to meld together what you have just said and what Annette shared, because we also have to remember that we have many people within our Jewish community who are Jews of color, for whom this is really important for us to engage and see them, and to affirm not only our responsibility as Jews, as somebody who's separate, but as remembering that we are all created in God's image and there is an obligation to us. So Annette, you so beautifully spoke about the priestly blessing that you give to your biracial grandchildren and that blessing of protection. So I want to use that as an opportunity to go back to the text of the priestly blessing, which I think really has in it a charge for all of us. Sean, if you'll share the screen again. So in a very different context, for a very different reason, the Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks wrote about the priestly blessing and what depth of responsibility it has for each of us. And so he wrote, and under normal circumstances, if we were in class together, I'd ask one of you to read it, but in order not to mess up the muting and unmuting, I will read it here. The Lord bless and protect you, he says. Blessing in the Mosaic book always means material blessing. It means fundamentally that basic protection. And then he goes on to say, in the early pioneering years, people are lifted by a collective vision and energy, right? Like when you think you're part of something, you have hope, you have vision, you have passion, you believe that you're part of a collective, you're all together and everything is going. But then as people become affluent, as they become, as Dina said, comfortable, as they start to take advantage of the privilege that they are given without maybe even being aware of it, they begin to lose the very qualities that made earlier generations great. They become less motivated by ideals than by the pursuit of pleasure. Now think for a moment, all of you, about where our country has been, especially in the time right before the lockdown, right? As we are encountering our world and as we are just moving, going, and there's not necessarily a lot of concern for the plight of others. They become less motivated by ideals than the pursuit of pleasure. Thus, the foundation of why I was starting this class in the first place, right? Everyone's binging Netflix, right? We're in lockdown and we're all just kind of trying to distract ourselves. They think less of others and more of themselves. They begin to be deaf and blind to those in need. They become, in a word, decadent. What happens to nations also happens to individuals and families. Hence the first blessing, may the Lord protect you, means may God protect you from turning blessing into curse. Any thoughts on that, just as we are I want to pause right here. Is there anyone, and I can't see you as well, so
do you want me to stop the share, Michelle?
No, because I want to go back into the share, but if there's anyone who has a comment on that, you can put it in the chat. And if not, I'll move on with my own comment, which is that one of the things that we need to be protected from is the protection from not seeing others, from becoming people who are more concerned with ourselves and with what's happening to us than what's happening in the world. One of the biggest challenges of this time that we've been in, as we're isolated from each other and we're in little boxes here, is how do we see each other? And then Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks goes on to say, may the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And although the word grace has such strong Christian associations, we sometimes forget that it's fundamental to ours. What is grace? Judaism is a religion of intellect, of study, questioning, ideas, argument for the sake of mind. The historian Paul Johnson described Rabbinic Judaism as an ancient and highly efficient social machine for producing intellectuals. If we only see with our minds, he says, we are not seeing. The second priestly blessing is, may God make his face shine upon you, meaning may God's presence be evident to you, visible on the face you show to others. And I would add to that, on the face of God that we see in others, on the original charge that we're given in the book of Genesis, to see the face of God in all others. And then he says, finally, why was it the priests who were chosen as vehicles of God's blessing? The priests had no share in the land. Unlike the rest of Israelites, they had no fields or farms, no businesses, no source of income through the work of their hands. Instead, they were dependent on the gifts of the people. So when the Israelites prospered as a whole, the priests benefited. They had a direct interest in the prosperity of the nation. They were able to bless people with a full heart because if others were favored, so too would they. And with this, I want to ask my question of all of us, which is, right now the world is set up in a way that if one community prospers, another does not. What is the blessing of the priestly words as Rabbi Jonathan Sacks sees it? What would it look like to create a world in which it wasn't a zero-sum game, in which we could all be like the priests and try to lift up the idea that we do not have to ignore the pain of others in order for ourselves to flourish? And he concludes, protection, grace, peace. These are God's blessings communicated by the priests. We are what we pray for. If you seek to understand a people, look at its prayers. The Jewish people did not ask for wealth or power. They did not hunger after empire. They had no desire to conquer or convert the world. They asked for protection, for the right to live true to themselves without fear, for grace, the ability to be an agent for good in others, for peace, that fullness of being in which each of us brings our individual gifts to the common good. That is all our ancestors prayed for, and it is all we need. All right, if you'll take us off of shared screen, I'd love some reflections on Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. What does that interpretation of the priestly blessing give us in terms of a charge for how we see and how we stand at this time? We're digesting Lord Sacks's words. Any thoughts? Did I see Elizabeth's hand? Elizabeth Rosenzweig.
I'm unmuting you. Yep.
Got it. Yes, thank
Got
you.
it.
First of all, thanks for showing Blackish. It's one of my favorite shows. So I'm not sure if I'll exactly answer your question, but I've been trying to think about how to deal with this because I was raised, you know, on my parents' shoulders going to civil rights protests in New York. So I already have it in me. But over the years, I think I did become comfortable and not quite. I mean, I went to a lot of marches, but anyway, long story short, I have a bunch of friends who either are Black or have kids who are Black. And I have been listening much more than I used to. And then I think what really got me is I started to think about my three sons who are pretty much adults. And one of my friends he's white, but he has his sons are Black. He said, what if every morning you had to say, please remember to be good to the police, and you weren't sure if your son would come home that day? I mean, that just destroyed me. It just brought it right to me. And then I started to think also about the hope, because, and I think this is part of what you were saying, like, where do we find God? I mean, my mother's whole family was, you know, killed in Auschwitz. Where do we find God? And I realized it's a heavy lift right now to know, but you gotta look where the light is shining. So my middle son lives in South Boston, and he wasn't at the demonstration, but he sent me a picture of the demonstration in Boston a few nights ago, and the demonstrators were at the police station down near Northeastern, and the Boston police were taking a knee. And I felt like, well, there's God's face right there. And And then I also watched a whole bunch of videos, and there was one of like the demonstrations across the country. And there was 2 or 3 where, you know, there was like demonstrations and black men and white women mixed in, but the white women stood up. Like in Louisville, they made a chain to protect. And there was 2 or 3 where I saw where like a young white woman jumped up in front of a black man and just stood there. And I thought that was a little bit of God there too. So I want to be those people. I can see where they are. I'm not sure how to get myself there yet, but that's it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Anyone like to jump in after that powerful statement?
Michelle?
Yeah, Terry.
It's Terry. So yeah, I'm devastated by the whole thing. And I just wanted to share that when the whole massacre and murder took place in Pittsburgh, I got these emails from people who are, you know, non-Jewish friends expressing sorrow to me as a representative of the Jewish people. And it came out of nowhere. And I was blown away. And so the other day I turned to my Black friends and I sent them emails and texts and stuff and said exactly what you're hearing this morning, to say that I'm, you know, I'm not with them, but I share the same pain for them. And I think that the other thing on the conversation I was having was that just like we talk about the Palestinians and Israelis, that the only thing that's going to solve the problem is to have the conversations and to be with each other and learn about each other one-on-one, small groups. And I think it's the same kind of thing. If we don't, when people talk to their friends and they hear their stories, and they can share that with them, then we'll understand a lot better. And I think we have to do more of that. So the kinds of things that Temple Emmanuel is doing now and is planning to do in the future are really, really important to bring along the community, so that those of us who might not have that connection or family relations can also participate and can also learn.
Thank you, Terry. Jamie.
Two things. One is a textual thing. I actually gave a lesson on the priestly blessing on Shavuot at a different synagogue. And I brought the rabbinic commentary on the word Ya'er in the second line of the blessing. The commentary of Sforno to the discussion, and he basically interprets it as not God, what is our usual translation? May God make, well, Sfornos interprets it as, because it comes from light, shine. May God shine his light upon us, but Sforno says, may God illumine us and make our eyes to see what is happening in the world and what we can do and what God is doing and allowing us to do. So I think that we can interpret that. I won't go into more on that, but I want to say it's really important for us to have these discussions, but it's even more important for us to go beyond these discussions and do something. For instance, the first thing is like what Terry just said, reach out to our Black friends and associates and acquaintances, to read about what the Black community is asking from the white community to do now. And that is, 1, to reach out to them, 2, to sign petitions, 3, to demonstrate with them, 4, to make donations to very specific lists of organizations. 5 is to purchase things from Black-owned businesses. And there's a whole list of recommendations of what we can do, not as Jews and as white people. And I would suggest that we try to do some of those things. We all can't do all of them, but most of us can do one or more of them. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Jamie. Speaking of things that we can do, and tying together both Jamie and Terry's conversation, the biggest thing we can do is listen, learn, and be a source of love. And so the final piece of the priestly blessing text is actually a comment that reflects very beautifully, Jamie, on your Yair comment that says that right after the priestly blessing,